Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? It's time for the final countdown. The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's rock.
Facebook family and friends, what's happening, you guys? Oh my God. Oh, where did my camera go? What is going on here? Let me see. Oh, there you are. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. What's up, you guys? What's going on? Good evening, Monday night. I don't know if you guys were there last night. Junior's team bucking it out. Had to wear a little bit of the red and gold to represent for him. Ooh-wee. So let me see. Where's Sammy? I know Sammy was at the gym. Bam. I got to send him this link real quick. He might come in while he's on his ride home, or he might wait until he gets home. But I promised you guys we'd be here tonight. So we are here. Man. I see we got 7 of you guys in the comments already. What's up, Kurdo? Misaku. Aho. Bina. What's going on, you guys? Don't forget, like, share, comment. We appreciate all of that. Let me see. Don't forget to like, share. Bam. We'll put that right up right there. Bam. Throw that up there, you guys. So what's going on tonight, man? It's a Monday night. We're coming off the Super Bowl Sunday. Great win for the KC. There, it was a hell of a game, you guys. We watched the entire game, not knowing what was going to happen, watching them go back and forth. As you guys all know, I hate San Francisco. Not going to lie to you, I am a hater. But they played a hell of a game. Every snap, every play, it was great. Got to give them their props. Kansas City was able to eke it out at the end, which definitely made me happy. As you guys know, my son was a massive Kansas City fan, which used to get at my goat because, I'm a Charger fan. AFC West, Kansas City is one of our hardest opponents, but we definitely are celebrating last night's win right now. So, chat, I see we got a bunch of people in here. Anybody feeling anything they want to talk about anything, just say it. Otherwise, we'll move forward with a topic. I know you guys, a lot of you guys were here on Sunday. We talked about recovery, as we always do. Recovery is a great part of what we do. I just had a great visit from a good friend of mine. My brother, Juve, was here. Just sent him home with some food. Juve did quite a bit of time too. Been out for a long time. He runs a sweat lodge now and a recovery program for the Department of Corrections. Can you imagine that, right? After being in there, you go back there to help the guys that are in there. Ain't nothing better in the world. That's a testimony right there for change, for recovery, for growth. Let's see. Just so you guys know, I am still working out some little kinks in our system, but it seems to be working pretty well right now. See if I can get up in here. Bam. There we go. All right, now I got your live chat feeds. So how's everybody doing tonight? How's everything going? Everybody feeling okay? You guys having a tough time with school, trying to heal, but in school I have to write essays about trauma. Hard to forget while I'm trying to forget. Yeah. That's a rough one, right? Um, dealing with trauma doesn't mean forgetting trauma, sister. Hell yeah. Hey y'all. Definitely appreciate these check-ins. Thanks, sweetheart. How you doing, Jay Real? You're welcome to come on live anytime you want if you want to talk about something. Mikasu. So in my experience, dealing with trauma means not forgetting, but working through, right? I've had to deal with the traumas that I've experienced in a way differently. And so for the majority of my life, my emotions, whether they be sadness, anger, fear, they've always manifested in violence, right? And so for me, I'm okay hanging in there. Right. Where do we start? Our trauma is part of what made us what we are. Our trauma is part of what brought us to the point where we're at now. And so for myself, right? Like, and I'm speaking for me, you guys, forgetting it isn't part of my healing process. Forgetting it isn't part of my recovery process. Dealing with it, working through it, remembering that it helped make me what I am. Those are all part of my healing processes. That's part of my heal, right? That's part of my movement forward. But forgetting it is not something that I've ever thought was an option for me. I'm getting through acceptance. Yeah, accepting that we were hurt, right? Accepting that we were traumatized, accepting that things were done to us that were unforgivable. That doesn't mean we can't forgive and move forward. So I don't know if you guys know this. There's an amazing documentary being done right now by some friends of ours here at Formers and here at Ocor. Catherine Beecher and Lucas Belkin have produced and we had Lucas on our show. They've produced a documentary called I Hate You, But It's Killing Me. And it discusses, right, how holding on to that anger and that hatred and that hurt is more destructive to us than it is the person we hurt. There's cases where you hate someone to your core and they don't even remember what they did to make you mad, right? So how is your hating them hurting them? It doesn't, right? It just hurts us. At least that's the thought, right? For myself, forgiving them and moving forward with my life is more important than letting them to continue to traumatize me, as hard as that is, right? Like, why do I want to continue to allow them to re-traumatize me over and over and over again? So for myself, forgiving and moving on, and forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. Like, I know everybody says if you forgive, you have to forget. I disagree. Like, personally, I feel that's bullshit. Just because we've decided to forget someone doesn't mean we have to forget what they've done to us, or allow them back into our lives. Like, I think that's a crock of shit. But forgiving them and letting it go and moving forward with my existence in my life, that's how I do it, sister. But regardless, if you're in pain, Aho Matakiasi, we're here for you. Reach out anytime. Like, we're with you. We don't talk much about my childhood, and we don't talk much about my trauma or my hurt or my harm, and mostly because I've moved forward as best as I can. There's a lot of a pain. You don't even have to tell them you forgive them. Just do it. The time is right for you. Absolutely, Jay. You don't ever have to tell them when the time is right or not. Like, you can forgive them and forget that they exist. Move forward. forgive them their crime, um, forgive yourself for being a victim, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that we hold inside, anger at ourselves for being victimized, right? Like, hey, Lexi, love you, kid. Helping others, because helping others covers that up. Talk about it when you're ready. Right, right, or don't. Right, to each his own, right? Or don't talk about it. For me, you're right, Jay, right? Like helping others helps to heal those wounds that I have inside. And it's hard, we talk about it, and I know, right? Like I know I'm a big dude. I know I can be imposing. I can seem stronger than I am or seem. Um, I have a lot of trauma. My childhood was far from ideal. If you're talking about important stuff, your nephew just dropped a vape on his face and said, oh, "This guy is falling." Yeah, tell my nephew I love him. Uh, I feel like living within that trauma and allowing it to eat my soul, right, is just being traumatized again. And we've all been hurt. We've all been traumatized by something. My trauma's a little bit more violent and different than most, um, which uh, for me has been really hard to deal with to and to work through. Uh, uh, but remembering my value has been hard. No, don't be sorry, because like that's what we're here for. We're here to talk. That's why I asked for you guys to say, "Hey, what's on your heart?" Don't be sorry you brought it up. Uh, your feelings and your life and your experience and your trauma are valuable. You're valuable. Much love, my brother. I see you, Kirk. And yeah, at some point we all have to face it. We can run as long as we want. I was talking to somebody the other day about what we say during the day um, holds nothing at the bottom of the night, right? Like when you're laying down by yourself alone and everything that has ever happened to you or you've ever done is in your face, right? Like you're laying there and you're trying to sleep, and every person you've hurt, passes through it. All of your fears sit inside you, right? That darkness, and it's the bottom of night, right? Like you're at that bottom point where everything's dark and you feel every hurt and pain and all the suffering you've caused or has been caused to you, right? It's vastly different than the things that we feel during the daytime and in the light when we're talking and we're jovial and we're happy. Those are the traumas, right, that we live with. And every time we can tick one off and forgive that person or that situation, right? Forgive ourselves for being victims. Um, that's one less thing that we have to listen to in our heads. So, Mikasu, like, I love you. Um, I recognize you. I hear you. Um, you've done nothing wrong. Like, bringing it up was an amazing lead to today's talk, right? Like, sometimes we come in here, we don't know what we're going to talk about when we come in here. Sometimes Sammy and I generally have an idea of what direction we want to push our conversation to, but there are days where we come in and just say, "Hey, what do you guys want to talk about? Like, what's on your mind? What are you feeling?" Um, and it's not wrong trying to forget. I just don't know if it'll help you heal. Like it might, um, but it's never worked for me. Hold on, Jay. I'm trying to read your stuff, and I got pop-ups. Yes, it's easier to drink or drug you down, so we get to a place you can't dig yourself out of, and helping others definitely helps us through, so we don't face our own reality. When you're ready, I'm ready to hear your story. I love you. Absolutely right. So let's talk about my dad real quick. Uh, my dad started using heroin as a teenager. Um, Him and my mom met when he was 30. I came around when he was 31. My dad had never been clean longer than maybe a year in his life since he was a teenager. 50 years he shot up heroin. 50 years. The only time I knew my dad sober and clean was when we were in Racine Correctional Institute together. My dad and I did some time. We were in the same prison for like 7 months before I got shipped out of state and he went home. And my dad was a good dude. No, my dad was a horrible human being. But he loved us, right? Like my dad, my older sister and I were talking. We can't remember a single time my dad raised a hand to any of his children. There's no, he might have yelled at me once when I was a kid. You know what I mean? That didn't make him a good dad. My dad also took me out on drug runs and smuggling runs to Mexico my entire childhood. When I was 8 or 9, I watched him shoot a guy who tried to rob him. So my dad in no way was a great dad, right? But he was a good dude. And he loved us, always told us he loved us, always told us he wanted better for us. He just didn't live the life that he said, right? So I'd never known him sober or clean. Never. He'd been on drugs the entirety of my life. He might have been clean for a couple weeks, maybe. But we were in RCI together. And we got to have some amazing talks. And he's been dead since 2011. And but we're in RCI together and we're sitting out on the yard. And here I am. This is 2002. 30-something. Sitting down with my dad on the prison yard. My dad done time all over the country. Right? My dad's done time in California penal system, Mexico. My dad did time in a federale prison before I was born for smuggling heroin over the border. And my grandpa bought his way home in the 60s. But here I am sitting with my dad, and this iron rock of a man started crying. We're in fucking prison. We don't cry, right? Like, I looked over and I'm like, what's the matter, bro? You know, what's going on, Pop? And he looked at me and he was like, I'm sitting on a prison rec yard with my son. And I didn't catch on what the problem was. Right? Like, okay. He was like, I've ruined your life. And so we started talking about his addiction and how, you know, since childhood, he would chase this pain away by getting high. And then the high would go away and he would have more trauma and more guilt and more pain related to using the drugs to escape from that original pain. And it continued and it continued and it cycled and it cycled. And he just kept doing it. And he never found a way out of that hole. Right? He never found a way away from that. And he apologized and asked me for my forgiveness. And it was never easier in my life to say, I forgive you, right? Like, it was never easier in my life to say, thank you for acknowledging what you did to me, right? Acknowledging the nightmares that I had from watching the things that had happened and being a part of the stuff that I grew up with. If he hadn't have done that, I still would have forgave him. But I would have forgave him for me and not for him. So I hope that helps you, Mikasu. I hope that helps you with your trauma. Other than that, like, I'm just a human. Yeah, right? I'm just a person. To some extent, I believe in a product of products of environment. Absolutely, our environment colors and influences who we are and what we become. But my environment wasn't totally at fault for who I was, right? Like I knew what I was doing was wrong. Um, I just had nature versus nurture. Yeah. I just had an established belief system that allowed me to justify what I did to hurt others as part of my belief system. It took a long time to work that out. Um, in the beginning, it was a lot of faking it, right? Like uh, pretending I wanted to be better. Um, so Sam and I talked about it early on in my recovery about how when I first started, um, I just wanted to go home, right? I was tired of being in prison. And I knew if I kept fucking up and going to the hole, they were never going to let me out, right? I'd still be in there today. I'd have another year to go before they would have had to have let me go. So in the beginning, I entered what was called a fear based or consequence based change. I changed because I was afraid of having to stay in prison longer. And I wanted to work my way home so I could get out. Not because I really believed in being a better person at that point, um, or because uh, I thought what I was or what I was doing was wrong, right? Like that early me. Uh, I did have a lot of anger in me, bro. You need both hands down. I love you too, Lisa. Um, so I didn't start changing because I wanted to be a better fucking person, right? Fuck, I'm in prison, man. I'm in prison. I already got a decade in. Uh, I've done years in double door segregation and segregation. Uh, I've watched pigs spit on my food before I ate it because they hated me and I hated them, and I still ate it so that they could see, right? Like I just didn't want to be in a cage anymore, and so I started being better, right? Like I started acting better, and I started modifying my behavior because I wanted them to let me go, right? Like not because I wanted to be a better person. Slowly through time, um, I started to develop questions about my beliefs and my morals, which were vastly different than society. Um, as I started developing those questions, I started getting praise from places I'd never been praised before. And it made me feel some type of way, right? Like people were acknowledging me for doing good things that I had never got acknowledgement from before, and it made me feel some type of way. And so gradually, I started to feel better about who I could be, not who I was, right, but who I could become. And then slowly, as I was working through that, I started questioning the morals much in a much deeper sense. Well, why is this bad? Oh, let's add Sammy in here and I'll finish off my thought. So why is this bad, right? And Sam and I had talked about now I'm looking at my growth as a principle based change, right? I had started off this consequence based change where I was only changing because I wanted to go home from prison, not because I wanted to be a better person. But as I grew into that and I started questioning my morals and my belief systems and my feelings, and I started feeling things about how I was growing and people were praising me and how I felt about that praise, right? That people telling me how proud they were of me. I started to develop a principle based change. Now, over the last decade, um, formers as a group, my circle, the people that I've surrounded myself with as a group, and Sammy as a mentor and my best friend, my big brother, right? They've helped me grow that principle based change to where now I feel like doing wrong is wrong, right? Because growing up, I didn't have that. Being in a cage, I didn't have those feelings. I didn't. I can tell you exactly what I felt when I hurt somebody, right? The deserving that they felt. So, um, yeah, for me, uh, that change was principle based, moral based, my core. right? Like I want my children to see me as a good man. I want my children to see me as someone they can be proud of. I want my children to grow and talk about their dad who had this horrible start in his life, but became a pillar, right? Became a part of his community who cared and really fucking did. So, but anyways, I don't know how I'm out, but I want to message you tomorrow. I need to talk to you ASAP. My time is ticking. I need to talk. Jay, hit me up. I love you as well. Mikasu, uh, I don't have to write about trauma. I'm glad to hear that, Mikasu, right? Like, I'm going to bring Sammy up to date about what we had started our talk about. And so we'll come back up here. So Mikasu, our Canadian Ojib sister.
Yeah, I read the comments.
Okay. And so we were just talking about healing and trauma. And so again, like I said, I don't know what works for you, but forgetting my trauma or trying to forget my trauma never helped me work through that. Right? Like facing my trauma slowly, a piece at a time, with help, with assistance. Like all those are what helped me through my trauma. So I don't know, but again, I'm going to tell you to each his own. And like I said, what worked for me might not work for you, but what works for you might work for someone else.
Yeah. That's a big one, man.
Yeah.
But I think we talked about this, I think about a month ago, where, because you remember people were asking, like, I was saying they got to do reps, right? And so it's like when it comes to trauma, in my opinion, is that the more you can spend time talking about it, right? The less of a stronghold it has over you. Like you have to familiarize yourself with it intimately. Like we've been taught to avoid it, right? Like there's and addictions, and I mean, I would say most of my life, well, all of my life was traumatic. I was in the womb when my mom tried to kill my brother, and then he was taken from her, and then I verified with my relatives, like she picked up with me where she left off with him immediately. Like my tias were telling me, horrific stories of what they witnessed in my infancy, like when I was an infant, much less two, which is when the sexual assaults started. Now, I can talk about that stuff today, and most of the time, and I've been doing this a long time. I started my healing in '99, so it's not like yesterday. It's a long time. It's 25 years, 30 years. The idea of interacting with it, and I would suggest primarily in a professional setting, right? Like with a real therapist that you can vibe with who specializes in trauma. And I think a lot of 12-step groups and in the literature we talk about that. I talk about this a lot, right? Where the doctors and the professional world kind of snub their nose at 12-step groups, and 12-step groups kind of snub their nose at doctors and professionals. And I think they both get it wrong. I do. Again, I'm big on data, right? Because I don't want people to think I'm just, I have ideas, and it's great when they pan out with research.
Right.
I think it's great. But the research shows that people who go to counseling and also go to 12-step groups do better as a group than those who go to one or the other across the board. Right? So there's, I paid attention to that. And I do know that there is no way I should have been unpacking my deep-seated trauma in a 12-step group with laymen's who often, have, very, very limited experience actually, you know, and I even try to be careful when I'm in the room, you know, because I know I have that professional experience, but a lot of times I'm just recommending that, hey, you gotta get into some real counseling, and you gotta overcome all the stereotypes you have about it, you know, and that's tough because a lot of us have been burned by counseling, and to be honest, if I'm just gonna keep it real, we've given counseling in some cases, not everyone's, a half-assed attempt. There are those of us who half-assed our way, tried to manipulate our way, who had no intention, who only went to counseling because it was, you know, mandated or whatever, right?
Yeah.
We didn't really understand the importance of the opportunity before us, right? And so, and unless you get, you know, good counselors, man, like it can be a freaking mess, right? Because there are some, dude, there are some counselors who can't tell their butthole from their mouth hole, you know, like, and there are some people who just, they go to counseling and they, you know, for whatever reason, no judgment, but for whatever reason, just don't know how to really be there and to see the value. And you know, and when you try to do it in 12-step world, you know, when most people drop out of the 12 step is when they get to the 4th step. They just, because that's when shit starts getting real.
That's
right? Like
Victoria stock, man.
And there's a lot, but that's where I think we have to be very cautious about how we're doing it. And then throughout the literature, I'm like, I hope you have a partnership between your 12-step world and your counseling world, because there are things you need to unpack there and things you need to process here, right? And you should not trust, you know, just a layman with like opening up any kinds of cans of worms for the sake of that, right? Like, and you know, I've always told our supporters, our members, like, you know, we don't have to go there like that. We wouldn't be, oh yeah, you know, I mean, those are ethics, you know, but it's, you know, if, and the ethics say, and the law says, and, you know, and they should be very clear, you know, that one, if you're thinking about killing yourself, killing or hurting someone else, if there's child abuse, elder abuse, right, or with your permission, right? So those boundaries, and I've done counseling for years, man, decades, right?
And just so we know, I support those.
Right. I mean, you have to. It's
Yeah.
for everyone's safety. And in fact, on the other side of that are counselors who don't report shit who should. But yeah, there are you know, there are people who have, counselors who have really messed up, you know, in their job duties and ethics. It's not ethical to do some of the shit that they do. Mandated reporting is there for a good reason. That's a whole nother conversation we can have later. But you also have a responsibility to be mindful of what you're spilling out. You know, like, you don't, I have stopped clients, I maybe even have stopped Monte from saying things that I could tell were going in a direction that were going to be detrimental to the client. Like,
yeah.
And here's what happened, and you know, I'm let you guys see behind closed doors here, right? Here's what happens. So in the beginning, you're open with the client. You're like, here are the limitations of confidentiality. Like, it can only go so far. However, I would always say, in the future, if we come, you know, if I see that we're getting to a point where we might be getting into a reportable situation, I'm probably going to stop the session and let you know that that's what I'm sensing. And then we can have a conversation about whether we need to, you know, do the same, do more, do less, or change, right? Here's the thing, and because I'm transparent that way, most clients knew they were about to disclose something that was reportable. And there's a lot of misinformation about what is actually reportable, and I can tell you what that is at some point. And most clients wanted to tell me anyway, even though they knew that it would get the ball rolling in that way. And here's why. Because it's something that was impending. It was something that was coming, you know, and in particular, a lot of child abuse situations, right? It doesn't matter if child abuse is in the distant past. or now it's something you have to. And so a lot of times families were like, we need to face this and get this over with. And what I would do was support them through that process so they didn't have to do it alone. And here's where I came in. Here's why a lot of folks appreciated what I was doing in my practice. A lot of times I had such a good reputation with human services, with the courts, with the DAs, with the judges, that a lot of times those folks, those professionals who are responsible for investigating and or pursuing, would often agree to let me continue to work with the person as a part of the process, which would often be better than just getting found out and now you're at the mercy of the court. And so it could, if you were really doing this in the right way and really, it could end up being a buffer, and so but these are the things that good counselors do, right? And so getting back to that, you just have to be very mindful. Let me read this comment. So yeah.
Hey Erica, hi sweetheart.
Yeah.
Go KC, baby.
There are good folks. Oh man, what a game! We got to talk about. But we'll come back to that. That was I was thinking about you too, man. So yes, there are good counselors. Believe that there are good counselors, and there are a lot of good counselors in my life. But I would say there are probably more bad counselors in my life than good. But it only takes one good one to really make a difference. And Monte, you've heard me say this a million times. People shop better for shoes than they do for counselors.
Absolutely.
How many of you have walked Gurnee Mills? Because Foot Locker's on one side and freaking Champs is on the other.
Champs on the other.
How many of you have walked the entire Gurnee Mills mall, stopping in every shoe department before you pull the trigger on the shoe you were going to buy? I'm not lying.
Yeah. And
yet you'll go to Google, pick one counselor. It's a bad counselor, and you're like, I'm done with this shit. This shit doesn't work. And if the shoe doesn't fit, return it and try a different shoe, right? Like if you might have even tried it and thought you liked it, but then later on it hurt. Like whatever. We have to do a better job. Like look, it takes effort and work. It takes effort and work. I'm on my third gym since I've been out here, right? And I finally found the gym that I like. Right? It takes effort and work and commitment. All right.
So I've been seeing a therapist, bro.
That's really important why you got to keep walking, Kurt.
Right. I've been seeing a therapist now for a few weeks, and I started looking for one before my mom died. And I started looking for one by talking to one and asking, first off, telling my story of what I'm trying to work through, and asked who she thought would be the best fit for me, because she knew and I knew she wasn't, right? And so we worked through it. We talked to a few people, and all of them pointed at this one person who said, hey, this person works really well with people from your background. Talk to him. My first interview with her, or first session with her, her exact words were, hey, listen, let's just talk and see if we like each other and see if there's anything I can do to help you, or see if, there's anything.
I'm the person for you.
Yeah. Turned out she's amazing. We've grown pretty close over the last month, month and a half. But you're right. Like, we will spend more time. I'll spend 3 or 4 hours straight looking at shoes and being like, which ones do I want? Let me order through. But we generally don't. Well, we will, hey, who should I go? This is who my insurance company recommends. That's where I go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't out of my provider.
And let me tell you why counseling works differently than calling a friend, right? It's something called the X factor, right? When you have friendship, that affects you in one way, and it's not all bad, and it's not all good either, right? When you have a professional who's doing it, you don't have the emotional connection, which is the X factor, that you have with, your personal relationships with folks, right? Whether it's family, friends, whatever. I have always said, especially for those of us, like me and you, Monte, the shit that we would ask our family to carry is too much to ask our families to carry, to ask our loved ones to carry. They would do it. They would try. But I've always said this also on the X Factor. If they could have helped you by now, they would have helped you by now. And that doesn't mean they didn't try. And that doesn't mean they didn't give it their blood, sweat, and tears. It's when there's that X factor is involved, you have to remove that, right? And you can still talk to your friends. So if you have a friend who's not getting along with his counselor, the best thing you can do, in addition to what you do to support them, right, listening, and is encourage them to find a better counselor, to find a different counselor. Like, just constantly, saying like, hey, if you're not getting what you need there, let's find somebody else. Let's see if you can switch counselors. Let's go somewhere else. Let's find out where your insurance covers, right? There typically are options, right? And so we have to that's what FA does, right? It's like, yeah, and it's not yeah, but it's yeah, and yes, Monte, you can talk to me about your trauma, but you probably need to talk to somebody else too. Let's see what we can do to find that.
We're the friend. We're not the licensed professional. And Mike, I love you, bro, but I disagree with you totally. It's not all about the money, and not all of therapists or counselors are about that. Now, yeah, you're right. Some of them are, and some of them will push drugs,
and there are, and I could call them out by name and Racine.
I know.
We know good counselors know Mike,
who the bad counselors are.
Who those clinics and who those practitioners are. And trust me, I took on a lot of battles against folks like that, man. And I'm not going to put anybody's name out there. I'm not going to put any particular organization. Yes, again, that is one fruit basket, but that ain't all the fruit.
Yeah,
And if there's poison there, don't frequent that water hole, man.
Right.
You've got to find them out, because some of us care. Some of us care enough about what we're actually doing that I have challenged psychiatrists, and here, you want to hear something shocking about psychiatrists and general practitioner medical doctors? You ready for this, Monte? This fucked with me when I first found out, man. And it's because I confronted a doctor who I was seeing. It was a sports doctor, right? I had really bad tendonitis or something in my arms.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the field at this time, but I didn't know that this was like a characteristic of their education. Most psych doctors, so psychiatrists specialize in medicine and diagnosis, and they are really like medical doctors, right? They are not counselors. Most clinics, most licensed facilities who do therapy and counseling will let you see a psychiatrist, but insist that you see one of their counselors or social workers, because you're mistaking being given a diagnosis and the doctor who's giving you medicine for counseling. That is not counseling. But some people who are abusing the system will only see a psychiatrist. And if the psychiatrist becomes, aware that you're kind of pill shopping or, whatever, medication shopping, they'll cut you off. And so what we've learned to do is go to the general doctors, because we realize they're gullible and vulnerable. Here's what I learned about general practitioners. They don't learn about addiction. Now, you would think this is 101, but they don't really learn about pill abuse and narcotics abuse, and they don't specialize in that. That's why a lot of them, I'm sorry, you don't have to apologize. Hey, Erica, if counseling ain't for you, it ain't for you. But if I'm just saying, if there are significant issues that someone has to deal with, so be it. Some people need counseling and would benefit. And I would say anyone can benefit from it, especially if you haven't really done it and if you have an opinion about it, but you haven't really done it, your opinion is probably biased, right? It's not, you might find that it's better than what, if I was a teacher, if I was in charge of giving licenses, if I was going to hire somebody, I would almost insist that every student should go to counseling for like 2 or 3 sessions. so that they can experience it, right? And have good recommendations where they go. But yeah, to each his own, as we say around here.
You're right.
And you know, pastors are some pastors are counselors, but not all pastors are counselors. Although they do, like, you can't even say counseling, because counseling is a protected term. It's a legal term, and it requires like a particular, you know, skills and education and paperwork, right? But a lot of them do, yeah. So so it says, yeah, I would have been a good idea to leave that counselor or marriage counselor. I would have been a good idea to leave. Sabrina Seymour, I don't understand your comment
I don't
there.
either.
But again, not everyone needs to go to counseling. But I would say just about everyone can benefit from it, right? You don't have to go to a gym either, right?
Right.
But I do think a lot of people would benefit from it, right? Even if it's to walk or whatever, right? I'm getting older, man, so I've got to keep moving. So I go, even though I'm still fat as fuck and get tired, but I'm going.
Hey, I'm there with you, bro.
I'm still strong though, you know, but
Right.
But anyway, so trauma, having said all that, right? It's building up this stage for trauma. Trauma is something that needs to be paired with a good therapist, a good counselor. I think we have to get used to being able to talk about the things that have caused us so much pain and hurt. And you have to get used to the pain. Here's crazy, right? You have to get used to the pain and hurt that it causes. Yeah. You know, like when you go to the gym and your first day of workout, the next day you're sore, but you have to be willing to go through that. And then you stick with it over the weeks, right? And pretty soon you do the same workout and you're not sore the next day. Again, It's not that it gets easier, it's that you get stronger. You become more flexible. You become more pliable. The rep doesn't take as much out of you, but you're still doing the same weight, right? It's the same thing with trauma, and with anything really. And trauma, we learn not to fear trauma. You know, the symptoms of it, right? And some of us have, you know, different stages of PTSD. But these diagnoses shouldn't make you feel like you're helpless. You know, I've got PTSD, but when I say it today, it's not the I just found out I have cancer type shit anymore. It used to feel like that, you know, but
yeah,
you know, we have to, and I think the 12-step world teaches you to accept this, like, this is what I have. Yeah. I mean, it's good to have friends, and I think there needs to be a balance between friends, 12 steps, right? We call those supporters in our group, and professionals, right? Yeah. If you're empathic, man, we all need a friend like that. And here's some more research. Ready for this? Research says that most people need a friend, ready for this, for 8 minutes. Like, when I've got something that's bothering me, 8 minutes from a friend is what I need. Isn't that incredible?
I can see that. You can do a lot in 8 minutes.
And you could do a lot of listening in 8 minutes, right? And at the end of that 8 minutes, that person just feels like like Erica's saying, you know, I was heard, right? And it's not always required that you give, you know, advice. And here's why 12-step members are cautioned about advice. We don't give advice if we can help it, in most cases, because we're not the ones who have to live with that advice. And you were talking about this when I jumped on, like, what works for you. You know, my husband cheated on me, leave him. You ain't the one who's got to live with that advice, right? Or the consequence. And then if that person does it and later comes back to resent you for it, right? A lot of times we give unsolicited advice. Me asking you to hear me out is not necessarily me asking you for advice.
And you know, that was really so. that was really disconcerting in the beginning of our friendship when I would talk to you and tell you something and wait for you to give me advice, but not ask you for your advice. And you would do things like say, okay, I hear you. What about, and you would change the subject or go into a new subject. And I'd be like, where's this great advice from the fucking big-headed fucking triceratop fucking dome guru? And you would just go on. And slowly throughout our conversation, I would start to work through it because we would talk about things that helped with it. And then I never felt like it was your fault if what I did was wrong, right? Like, and so I think a lot of people don't understand when we give advice to people, if the advice doesn't work, who are you going to blame?
Here's the bigger message behind that, Monte. If I'm giving you advice, that means I am communicating to you that I don't believe you have what it takes to navigate this.
Yeah.
I can, but this is tricky. I'm going to help you get to where I would have told you to go anyway.
Right.
So, there was a guy, his initials were DS, right? And this guy came to me one day, and I had his permission to record this session because I was in training and I wanted to use our session to have my intervention reviewed and scored for proficiency with motivational interviewing, right? It's a process. So you explain to the client, like, hey, I'm not gonna give up your identity. I just need to record this so that my instructors and trainers can hear how we're interacting, and then they'll give me guidance on how I could do better, right? It's not about what you're saying. It's about how I'm receiving and how I'm caring for what you're saying, right? And so they're going to be scoring me, not you. In this particular call, this person said, I'm going to revocate myself because I have to come to group at 7 o'clock at night. Good night, Erica. I'm going to revocate myself because I have to come to this group right from work. I have to come here dirty. I've been working 12 hours by the time I get here. He also wants me to do, he wants me to stop smoking weed. I don't want to stop smoking weed. And then I got to come see you, of course, right? He's like, it's just too much. Now, what's the advice what's the guidance you would clearly say? What would be your reaction to that, right? I'm going to revocate myself. And by the way, I asked him, how much revocation? You ready for this? 7 years. I got to go do
Jesus
7 years.
Christ.
So what would be your immediate response to that as far as advice? Just one sentence. What would it be?
That's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life.
No, that's not advice. What's the advice?
Could you talk to your PO and see if there's something that you can change so that you're not feeling so overwhelmed by the situation? That would be my advice. If anybody has
some realistic advice in the fucking chat, can you put it in there? Because this guy just went clinical. No, what's the gut advice? What's the guidance you're going to say from your gut?
Don't do that.
Don't do that. That makes fucking sense, right?
Right.
That's great advice. Like, hey, pause, right? But if that comes from me, let me tell you what happens if that comes from me. How do you receive it?
Right now or in my gutter day?
If you're in that mindset, how do you receive that?
Fuck you. You're not my boss.
Yeah, it's my life.
Right.
It's my fucking life. Don't tell,
I know what I'm doing.
You don't have to live like, right? It's resistance. It's a pushback. It's pushing back, right? Now, at the end of this 45-minute call or session with this client, he went from, I'm going to revocate myself for 7 years. He already had a plan on who was going to watch his kids for those 7 years. Right? He was dirty. He knew he was dirty. He was going to have to drop soon. But by the end of that 45-minute call, you know what he determined for himself? He's going to keep going to group. He's going to keep coming to see me. And he's going to pause smoking weed. All the advice I would have said immediately to him is where he ended up. So don't confuse what I'm saying with not helping people get to where they need to get to what we learn to do, even as friends, is help people figure that shit out for themselves with our help. That
Right.
way, you're not controlling their life. You don't become responsible for the words that you said, as far as I'm going to look at my crystal ball and tell you what would magically work for you, and then it doesn't work for you that way, right? And here's the bigger lesson. You're not dependent on me to live your life through me with the advice I give you. You walk out of there feeling like, man, I just solved that fucking problem. So, when I call you and I'm on FaceTime and I'm like, Monta, I can't figure out how to fix this fucking truck. It's all your knowledge, but it's my hands that did the work.
Yeah.
Right? And there's something about that makes me feel like I am more capable, as opposed to just dropping the truck off to you and having you do it. Right? You're helping me feel more capable, even though it's your knowledge that got me there. That is the magic. That's why advice makes it easy for you, who is not living that, to feel like you served a purpose. But it's not the best thing for that person. You're clipping that person's wings, and you're saying, I'm going to control what needs to happen in your life for you because I don't believe you can.
Right.
And 9 out of 10 times, they don't need you to control that. We're not talking about someone in crisis who needs you to grab them, tell them to shut the fuck up and sit down and just wait and breathe. No, we're talking about when you're just the unsolicited advice is ego, misinformed. And it just, I know you don't mean anything by it, but you're trying to be helpful. But in time, you'll realize that is not the best way. Right? You can lead people, but you can't, in the early days, my philosophy was, people would say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And my philosophy was, but you can hold its head underwater. That is the typical counselor. That is a typical friend. Yeah. That is a typical parent. I'm going to make you eat this shit that I want you to eat the way I want you to eat it, and you're better. No, nobody really responds. Thanks for the love, Christina. Right?
I love you, sweetie.
Nobody makes you, right? But that's how, when people walk into your office or into your home and sit on your couch, you want them to feel two things. One, that went way better than I ever would have anticipated, and then they'll want to come back for more. And you want that person to feel better about their possibility of managing this shit, with their own hands.
I remember quite a few of our fucking meetings and interviews where I didn't walk out thinking things like that. Like, there was a couple of times I walked out wanting to punch you in the fucking mouth.
Well, because I don't confuse this for not being straight to the point.
Yeah.
Or saying things that needed to be said that probably nobody else would say to you.
And a few of the meetings that I did leave angry or frustrated, right? I don't want to say angry because I'd never really been angry with you, but I was frustrated that I didn't have the responses that I wanted. Those were the meetings that I normally took the most from, right? Like, I've always, and I don't know why, it's always been a lot easier. Okay, I do know why, right? When I met you, and for the first time when we sat and talked together alone, first off, I seen a lot of my pain reflected in your pain, right? Like, I understood you knew how I hurt, right? You might not have hurt the same way, but we hurt the same way, right? And so that gained a lot of respect for me, for you, right? Like, you didn't come from some school where you sat in front of a book and they told you what to think. Your ability to frustrate me just to the point of making me figure it out and think about it, right? Those were the ones I took the most from. And you're right in the sense of, I wouldn't have been able to get it from anybody weaker, right? Like, and I had you already know, my ego, my ego was a huge thing, right? Like, we know my trigger. When my brain says, who the fuck does this person think they're talking to, right? That's my first sign that I'm going to erupt, right? Like, there's a problem here. My brain has an issue. And so, yeah, absolutely. Now, we're an hour into this, and you guys know we only do 30 minutes to an hour on weekdays. We're going to get out of here soon. Let's talk about that gangster motherfucking game last night.
Tell me why I don't have any fingernails left.
Fuck, man. And I talked about it at the beginning of the show. Everybody knows I hate San Francisco. I hate the Raiders. They're the two worst teams in my world, right? I hate them both with a passion. I couldn't give more props to the Niners for the game they played last night. They played great. They fucking shut KC down so many fucking times.
Yeah.
But Patrick Mahomes and his veteran crew of winners, right, who have been there, who have been under the pressure, who have won every single one of their Super Bowls from 10 points behind, right? They had that experience. And that's what showed at the end was their experience to handle that. But all props in the world to the 49ers, man. That game was amazing. I almost cried. I fucking the whole gambit of emotions. And
it was like super, super high and then super low and just like, oh, yeah. And God, man, but
yeah,
I got to say that the 49ers didn't lose that game as much as Kansas City won that game. Right? Like they did at the end, they were really struggling.
Yeah.
Like the whole game. And like the penalties were terrible, but
their experience showed.
At the end of the day, the leader stepped up and stepped in and stepped forward, right? Like he led his team to that victory, man, and got a lot of respect for the kid, man.
We talk about anything, but our focus is on recovery. Our focus is on
change and recovery.
If you look at the top of our screen right there, Formers Anonymous, a group of people seeking redemption and freedom from a lifestyle of self-destructive involvement with crime, street life, hatred, alcoholism, drug abuse, power, and control, right? That's what we're focused on. It's changing that dynamic of our former lives.
So but on the recovery side, the change side, it's all the issues that people deal with because those things are triggers for a lot of us. Trauma's a trigger. Trauma have us out there. Trauma is probably why I spent damn near 20 years in prison.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have known that then. I know it now.
Yeah.
I became willing to lay that violence down immediately the moment my trauma was acknowledged and validated. Like it's incredible how that worked.
And so at the beginning tonight, Christina, we talked about my experience with my father in prison and the heartbreak he felt when he realized he was sitting on a prison yard with his son, right? And when he asked me for my forgiveness at that moment in my life, right, I didn't understand it. As I grew and I grew in recovery, it became much more poignant and much more important to my future recovery and much more helpful to my trauma and the trauma that he put me through, right? Like it definitely became that. But yeah, bro, I'm right there with you, right? Once I started recognizing the traumas that I've been through and working with them and dealing and working through them, it's a life changer for me. I don't know what it is for others, but it was
yeah. So I mean, if there's ever an audience that wants to, an audience member, or anybody on the feed that wants us to talk about something, just drop in the chat or send one of us a message. Like we will do that. There's nothing off topic. Sex, drugs, rock and roll.
I got 3 rules. You guys. While we're on air, there's no hate speech allowed, there's no bullying allowed, and there's no calls to violence. Those are the only rules.
Yeah.
That's it. I'll talk about it. Anything else you want. If you come on here,
we can talk about hate, but we're not
absolutely.
We're not, of course, we're all adults and we keep it simple here, So anyway, I'm going to get going. I got a kiddo who needs to talk to me right now.
Tell her I love her.
Much love to everyone. We'll be on again mañana.
Tomorrow night.
We'll be
tomorrow
on.
night.
8:30-ish.
9.
This is our 8:30-ish.
9. We got on at 9:05. That was our 8:30 to 9.
8:30-ish, man. That's why I said it yesterday. Ish. It's got to be the ish.
It's got to be the ish. All right, you guys.
I'll see you guys tomorrow, man.
Love you guys.
Peace out, man.